joined now. We are now joined by Chuck Berghoff, co-founder of the Susan and Charles Berghoff Foundation, and by Robin Shepard, executive director of the Berghoff Foundation. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with us today. Let's start off with some introductions and then reflect on the film. So let's start with you, Chuck. Give us a description of your role with this foundation and why it was created.
Well, after we received Sue's LBD diagnosis, Sue told me that we had to find ways of making a positive difference for others come as a result of her diagnosis. Together with Robin Shepard, who's here with us today, we began focusing on what continues to be the mission of our public foundation today, including dementia education, caregiver resources, and research funding. This became Sue's life purpose, and it remains mine today.
Let's back up and talk about Sue. What was her diagnosis? How long ago was her diagnosis?
Sue's diagnosis was 8 years ago. It was in 2017, early part of the year. She first started realizing symptoms in 2013. She was teaching at San Jose State University at the time.
Thank you for that background. Robin, let's turn to you now. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at the foundation.
Thank you. Thank you, David. And first, I just want to thank the people who made Facing the Wind, the director and producers. It's an incredible film, very humbling, and it's an honor to be here this evening. I want to share with you that I co-founded the Berghoff Foundation with Chuck and Sue, and I serve as the president and executive director, guiding strategy, partnerships, and programs to fulfill our mission for a dementia-free world.
Well, we all were gripped by the film. There was no doubt about the difficulty of the journey. Chuck, could you relate to the film at all?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's one of the best films I've ever seen from the standpoint that it's authentic, it's honest, it's accurate, and it's very informative. Um, it- I- what strikes me, and this isn't the first time I've seen this film, but every single moment you are seeing just ordinary people dealing with Lewy body dementia the way that we all deal with it. And so it's so authentic. That's the best way I can say it.
Did you relate to the kind of stress and the the roller coaster path that they had to take over a number of years?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I everything they were going through, I was bringing back memories of this, going through the same issues, and the advice that you get if you listen carefully to what is being said, like, one of the quotes was, you've got to get into their world. That's one of the fundamentals of dealing with anybody in dementia, particularly with LBD. You have to you have to always respond in their reality. You never tell them that they're wrong or it isn't that way, it's this way. You just have to learn how to. It's a lifelong improv show for you, and whatever they say they're seeing or doing, you have to learn how to get into their world. The language challenges, the feeling lonely, the even the idea of going on an RV trip. We had talked about that forever, and once you get this diagnosis, suddenly all those things that you dreamed about. We were married for 44 years. All those things that you were dreaming about and holding out for your retirement age, they evaporate instantly in front of your, just they're gone.
How difficult is the learning curve dealing with your loved one and also trying to cope with the pressure that you as a caregiver are facing?
Well, I think this film again brings us out with LBD. You're constantly that it's an evolving disease. It keeps moving forward, and you get to the point where you think, I got my arms around it. I got everything under control, and 3, 4 months later, suddenly there's another symptom that comes in. And now you go, oh my God, how do I do this? And then you figure that out. And it's 3 or 4 months later, and you think, oh, I finally got this under control. And then the next symptom comes in, and they fluctuate. They fluctuate from day to day, they fluctuate from hour to hour. The behavior, the moods, and things. So it's and you know, you ease into it. It's sort of like the story about the frog. You know, you drop him in boiling water, he'll hop out. But if you just put him in lukewarm water and heat it up slowly, you boil them, and you feel like that frog being boiled after a while, because it just every day it gets more and more and more of a challenge.
Obviously, the challenge for the person with LBD is very challenging. But are they sensitive to your mental health and the stress that you're going through, or is that something you try to shield from your loved one?
Well, one of the things that you have to understand is, if you walk into the room and you've got a smile on your face, you have a better chance of them responding instantly with a smile on their face. If you walk in and you are stressed, they can sense that and they become stressed. So you always have to be able to enter the room with your best, you know, in your best behavior, because they're gonna pick up on that.
What did you learn along early on in the process? Did you make some mistakes? Did you misread your loved one? In this case, Sue. And did you learn something quickly and have to adjust how you handle things?
Well, and again, like in the video, in the film, uh, Sue was starting to lose her ADLs, her activities of daily living, long before she was able to get a diagnosis. With LBD, it's very typical that it either takes you 4 or 5 years to get the diagnosis, or you're misdiagnosed with something else. And so you slowly, it starts where things that Sue had always done for decades in our marriage, I could see she was losing the ability to do those things. And so you just, you in a good marriage, you start picking these things up, and then you really, really want to get a diagnosis. You want so badly to know what is going on. And then when you finally get the diagnosis, and a lot of people don't understand this, you're relieved in a way that at least you now know what you're dealing with.
Robin, let's turn to you. And what kind of support and how do you provide education to the caregivers so that they don't feel alone and that they can provide the best care possible?
Oh, that's a great question, David. And I apologize to everyone. For some reason, my camera does not seem to want to work right now. So we really have three pillars to our mission, and honestly, it was inspired by Sue Berghoff and Chuck's wife. And for those of you who may not be aware, Sue passed away in May. Sue was an educator in the final chapter of her working life. She was passionate about education. And in 2017, it was hard to find information, answers about Lewy body dementia. A lot of doctors really weren't aware of it, hadn't had any training. It was being underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. So education became a key focus. And the first thing we did was to get involved with partners like Stanford and Kaiser Permanente to do continuing medical education for doctors. And it was great for them. It was eye-opening for doctors and nurses to actually be able to talk in person with a patient who was experiencing the early stages of Lewy body dementia and had made a very clear decision to become an advocate. So that was Sue's purpose. She embraced that as her purpose going forward. And then beyond that, the other pillars of our mission include research. We have, again, partnered with Stanford, UCSF, and Brigham and Women's Hospital at Harvard. As research partners, we establish research fellowships for Lewy body disease and dementia research. which is very encouraging. There's so much happening in science. There's so much collaboration, and it's an honor for us to support this research. And then for caregiver resources, we started out by looking and listening and attending caregiver support groups, and Chuck has done that for 8 years now. And we learned a lot, and we started a caregiver support group in our community in South Santa Clara County because there really wasn't a group focused on Lewy body and related dementias. And it's been an incredible journey for us with the caregivers who come. Some of them have been coming since the beginning. Some of them, like Chuck, have lost their loved ones and they still come. And so we want to expand that. We're going to be adding a Zoom based caregiver support group so we can be available to more people. And for us, we actually invited a caregiver support group facilitator who's actually a geriatric nurse practitioner with Stanford Health, and she donates her time, and she is incredible. She's an incredible facilitator. We're very fortunate. So we want to expand that so that we can serve more people.
I know that neither of you is a clinician, but you having focused so much attention on LBD, it's very difficult to diagnose. Is this delay sometimes in diagnosis of LBD an impediment in terms of caregiving as well as support?
Yes. And in fact, I think not having answers is part of the existential challenge of having a dementia condition. And in the case of Lewy body, people with Lewy body disease are quite sensitive to certain classes of medications, for example, antipsychotics. And so it's not unusual for someone with dementia to end up in the ER, often from falls and injuries related to the falls. And in the ER, agitation, delirium are real outcomes for many people. And for someone with Lewy body, especially like you saw in the film, if they have lost a fair amount of their ability to communicate, to find the words to express, the ER staff needs to have an accurate recording, an accurate reporting of what the person's condition is. And so the caregiver, the family caregiver, is often very important in these situations. So having the diagnosis for a lot of people, they report a sense of relief at finally having an answer, a name, something that they can look to for answers. And getting an accurate diagnosis is not only going to help them with getting the proper medication, but even a proper prognosis so that they can sit down with their family, talk about the disease, learn about it together, and make a plan for the future.
A reminder, by the way, to all of you who are watching today, don't forget to go into our chat area and ask questions, because we're going to allot some time here in a couple of minutes to answer some of your questions specifically. Chuck, let's talk about nutrition and talking about the lack of communication. When you don't have granularity of communication sometimes, is there a hazard to the patient who may not be getting as much healthy food or sufficient amounts of food in their daily lives?
Well, I cared for Sue at our home the first 4 years by myself after her diagnosis. And one of the challenges, quite frankly, is we didn't have any other family here in California. So our kids all migrated to other parts of the country. And I was convinced I could take care of Sue forever in our home. And so I got to the point where I had about 10 minutes that were available for a meal to prepare it and get it ready for her. And so what happens is the only way you can do that if you're doing this by yourself, even if you're getting groceries delivered to the house, is basically you're throwing things in the microwave that are only going to be in there for 5 minutes. And so, from a quality standpoint, you get to the point where you're realizing that this can't be the most nutritional way to survive, and it's for both of you. You're both in that same time crunch, you, as the caregiver and your loved one. So that was probably one of the more frustrating issues, and and that's just the way it is. And then eventually I brought in a caregiver part-time, and I brought a second one in, and then within a year we realized she really had to be in a memory care where she had really a lot of 24-hour care. And she was there for 3.5 years, and I was there every day with her. So um, it's another thing is when you have the ability to put somebody in a memory care and get those services and that care level of care, you're not relinquishing your responsibility as the primary caregiver. And I was there every day, and it gave me the ability to see firsthand as I fed her over time, looking for signs of the progression of the disease, understanding really where it was, and helping with the feeding of her, and then ultimately when we reached the hospice level, I became actually uh, a very key figure in the discussions between the hospice nurse and the doctor after the first 6 months. Hey, did they maintain her in hospice care or not? And I was able to relate to them exactly what was going on because I was seeing her every single day. So I made it easier for them to realize that no, she still needed to continue in hospice care.
Besides caregiving, are there some other issues, Chuck, that families need to think about? Like, for example, legal matters as you're caring for your loved one.
Absolutely. One of the reasons you want to get an accurate and early diagnosis is probably most of us don't prepare very well for end of life. And so you get to the point where when you get a diagnosis for a neurodegenerative disease, it's fatal and there's no cure, and you've got a limited amount of time. You realize you have to start looking at things like who's got power of attorney for your loved ones. Make sure you've got that in place. Um, do you have a trust or a will? Is your loved one actually one of the trustees on the trust or in the will? Well, all these things that you have to work on. And then on the medical side, do they have a medical directive put together? And I tried to help Sue define her medical directive, and I found I couldn't do it. I waited too long. So the other thing is really important is we always stress the importance of a palliative care team. Um, find your palliative care team is going to consist of a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, and a chaplain. And in our case, it was the palliative care nurse who was able to sit down with Sue and I and actually help Sue get to the point where she could fill out her medical directive. The palliative care doctor, by the way, and the nurse, in palliative care is something, as soon as you get a diagnosis for something like this, you want to meet your palliative care doctor and nurse and the entire team, because they become very helpful to you as the caregiver, trying to figure out, do you turn left or right on this issue right here, right now? And they always are able to say, you go in this direction. This is the better thing to do. And ultimately, what you end up doing is providing better quality of care for your loved one, and you reduce the stress level to some degree for the caregiver.
Robin, can you give us an update on how research is going into LBD?
Yes, we're very excited to share. And first, let me tag on to what Chuck said. In all of our education and now in some of our research fellowships, palliative care is an important component. A lot of people aren't aware that you can ask for palliative care as soon as you get a diagnosis of dementia. And if the doctor doesn't proactively offer, you can ask. It's covered by Medicare. And it's so important because as the disease progresses, and there are less options to quote unquote fix things, palliative care becomes increasingly important because it's about comfort and care and well-being for the patient and their caregiver at home. So, so with respect to research, what's really exciting is that a lot of the research, there are an increasing number of collaborative efforts across research centers, and in addition, across disciplines. So, for example, some of the research fellowships that we are supporting are now looking at Lewy body disease in relation to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. As it turns out, a high percentage of people with Alzheimer's disease also have the presence of Lewy bodies, and same thing with Parkinson's. And then in terms of interdisciplinary approaches, because there is so much data that needs to be considered by researchers. So all of the assaults on our brain over decades of living, there's environmental factors, there's genetic history, there's comorbidities. For example, maybe you have heart disease or high blood pressure or other things that may impact your cognitive health. And then combining all of this data, looking at a person more holistically, having the science dig down beneath the symptoms, looking at the biology of the disease, is really an exciting aspect of research now, and it's going to move forward more quickly. Medical researchers are teaming up with technologists, with AI experts, with big data experts, because there's a lot of data and the brain is so complex. And so these collaborations have great promise for breakthroughs in diagnosing and treating dementia.
Thank you so much, Robin. Let's turn things over to Sophie now, and let's get some questions in from our visitors to our webinar today.
Thank you, David. There are some comments here in the chat. MM noted he was shocked by the eye-opening symptoms of the truck driver in the film, such as hallucinations and the on and off good and bad days with people and people not believing you. This is very relatable when you have an invisible disability. So frustrating when people think you're faking. It adds to your stress and disappointment with people while you're trying to deal with your illness. Totally understandable there. Looks like there's a friend of Sue and Chuck's also sharing some love in the chat. A couple of questions that have come up are there any care options for people without partners or on limited finances who may not necessarily be eligible for Medicaid? Is that something that Chuck or Robin, you can address?
Robin, I'm going to hand that one to you.
Actually, Sophie, I'm not an expert in this area, and here's where, people need to not be afraid, but to reach out, talk to their doctor, patient care coordinator, and insurance provider to get that information.
Okay. Another question has to do with palliative care. Is this team being referred to as who? A neurologist? Who makes up a palliative care team?
Even a primary care doctor, and I shouldn't say even, I mean the primary care doctors in this country do the lion's share of taking care of people with dementia. But a palliative care doctor can refer, a neurologist can refer, and it's definitely something we just want to encourage again that you seek out early in your diagnosis. It can be so very helpful for the patient and the caregiver.
Thank you. Lily asked this question. Any tips on speaking about the disease with grandchildren or youngest family members who may not understand the medical and technical terms, or even just talking about dementia?
I want to jump in here really quick. There's a book called Grandpa and Louie, and it's by Jennifer Randazzo. She's based in Georgia. The book is available on Amazon, and she has a website. We can put her name in the chat. It's a fantastic book. We highly recommend it. And it's cathartic really for the parents reading to their children and young children who are early readers. It's written in rhyme, and it's just beautifully done. And a book that I think a family could benefit from, not only the parents and the children, but the grandparents. So I highly recommend, I'll type it in, Grandpa and Louie.
Thank you. Anything you would like to add there, Chuck?
I just a couple of things kind of winding down here, and relating back to the film. One of the things that happens is you become a caregiver. In my case, my my role as a caregiver replaced my relationship with Sue as her husband, and as her primary caregiver, I became the safe place for Sue to express her frustrations, her anger, and other challenging behaviors. And you have to get to a point where you realize that this is not your loved one taking something out to you on you personally. It's just that you are their caregiver. And one of the things, if you are fortunate enough to get some help with other caregivers, or Sue's case, ultimately she was in the memory care. We got to the point where when I would walk in every day, she always had a big smile on her face when she saw me. So that's a reality that your role is changing there. This was mentioned in the film. Yeah, I certainly experience anticipatory grief every day, and I learned eventually you shed the tears, and then you move on like a mountain climber. You would take one more step forward, one day at a time, and it'll come back the next day, and you just keep moving forward. I One other thing that I wish that I had learned to do sooner was to learn how to ask for help from friends, from neighbors, from family members. And you get to the point where it's a 24 hour, 7 day a week job for you. And the idea of being able to go 2 miles down the road to Starbucks for a cup of coffee for 15 minutes was just way beyond reality until I found a way to get somebody to come in for a bit. And last, on a positive note, um, it, it, one of the things that after her diagnosis, I began to believe was that she was never going to have joy again. There was never going to be happy. There were never going to be really happy moments in her life. And I actually started discovering very soon after her diagnosis, there were things that brought her as much joy as anything else in our at that point 30 years of marriage. They're just different things, and they often relate to the dementia itself and the challenges that we're going through and dealing with it. But there, uh, there absolutely are going to be happy, joyous times that you're going to experience, and it's not like they're gone forever. So I just want to leave on that.
Sophie, do we have time to address one of the questions in the chat about diagnosis?
Really quickly. Yeah.
Okay, so just really quickly, there's a variety of approaches to diagnosing Lewy body dementia, and it's going to be a combination of reporting cognitive problems. So that's either self-reported or your loved one might report difficulties doing things that were once second nature. And on top of that, they may do tests. They may do a cognitive assessment, which is like a paper test. They may do a neuropsych evaluation. They may look at things like gait and balance, resting tremor. These are the Parkinsonism symptoms that are associated sometimes with Lewy body. REM sleep behavior. So a lot of people with Lewy body disease have a sleep disorder, which causes them to act out their dreams at night. They might thrash, they might get out of bed, they may fall out of bed or talk in their sleep. And so that's another potential indicator. But one of the best tests, besides also brain imaging, is cerebral spinal fluid tap. So a spinal tap, because the spinal fluid is a very good indicator of the presence of Lewy bodies. And so the approach to diagnosis is multiple steps, multiple tests, trying to look at the person holistically.
Well, Robin and Chuck, thank you so much for all you've shared with us today. I know that you've shared some great information. And we also want to point out that AARP has a dementia resource guide that you can download or request. And we will have the link. The link is up there on the screen now, but it's also in the chat area as well. Just be sure to click on Dementia Resource Guide. Also, we've put in the chat the links to the Berghoff Foundation, the Lewy Body Dementia Resource Center, the Alzheimer's Association, and the film that you saw, Facing the Wind. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that this has been useful information for all of you. And this concludes today's program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you, Chuck.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.